down to the stairs over there and you can get the dice.
Done. Make sure you put your mic on.
All right, it is 3 o'clock. Let's call the meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Please silence your cell phones, and I'll call roll. George McQuistion, here. Brian Fitzsimmons. Betsy Brunstetter. Here. Donna Cervantes.
Here.
Jorge Chanica.
Here.
Matt Guillory. John Robeson.
Here.
Ben Sellers.
Here.
Jeff Struble. All right, we have quorum. Item 2 is approval of the minutes. If anyone, there are no objections, we will consider the minutes approved by unanimous consent. All right. Minutes are approved. Consent docket items 5A and 5B. I'm going to request that item 5A be taken off the consent docket and heard immediately thereafter, only because there are a lot of moving parts and I have a small question about it. So consent docket is 5B. Do I hear any motions?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay. Fitzsimmons, do I hear a second?
Second.
Charnico, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, item 5A, 607 Northwest 28th Street.
This is a proposal for 2 new buildings at the northwest corner of 28th Street and Dewey on the western edge of the Paseo District. We reviewed the project in its entirety, including the landscaping, building materials, development standards, parking requirements, and signage, and found that it complies with all the applicable regulations and guidelines, and therefore it's been put on the consent docket for your consideration, but we're prepared to respond to any questions the commission may have.
I don't know if any of the other commissioners had questions. I think it's a great looking project. I just had, the one question I had is, the west elevation of the west building is basically that stucco wall, and I didn't know how you thought about it being up against the residential neighborhood.
Well, it's basically blind on that side. I don't know what to offer. Is it important to have something on the, it's not a very visible side, the west elevation. Would you agree with that? I don't know.
I own that property.
Yes, sir.
The 609 Northwest 28, the property in question. Yeah, we have a big problem with this.
Okay. Sir, could I ask you to come to the mic and again, state your name and address, please?
Lloyd D. Todd. I live at 3021 Lamppost Lane. I own the property at 609 Northwest 28, Oklahoma City. And I've been discussing it with him, trying to get to something that might be amicable. And I was suggesting, I says, you know, it may be a minimum of 8-foot distance between the buildings, but it's 120 foot of flat, long wall that sits out even with the front of our building. You have for 16 years, the fence has been 11 foot further to the east, and found out later on that I guess they measured it from another area, so the property line is actually within about a foot or so from the most western point of my eastern side of my building. And at that building there, he wants to put a fence, which is would be about 1.5 feet from my building, and then about 5'2" or so there would be his building. And in the artist's conception drawing, it looks 2-story. I wasn't sure if it was 1 or 2-story, but it has a long side, concerned about noise. It has back doors, possibly could be disturbing my 4 tenants, and would be very ugly is the most important thing. I think it'll detract from the value of my property. It has, well, you'll be having a building, within like 6 foot from my building, and there's no place else in Paseo. They're either touching or they're further than that, probably 8 foot minimum any other place. And I think I do have concerns about the parking issue also, which is already congested there. But more important than this, I'm concerned about affecting the value of my properties, and that it's a very, it's just a long, flat wall with a fence that's very close to my property at that one point. I do have a drawing that he presented to me, and I said it was unacceptable, but it's, I don't know if anyone wants to see this or not. And it shows the dimensions of the 5'2", where the edge of the building would be. The artist's conceptions drawing, it looks like it's more like 12 or 15 feet. And so it looks aesthetically good in this picture, but in reality, it will be extremely close to our building, and I think it can disturb my tenants, affect the value. I just oppose it in every way possible, for being that close. At least it needs to be further to the east, a few feet more at least, to be amicable. I even suggested that he move it 2 foot over and put a V and an angle where it would break the line and where it wouldn't be so close to the building. That was another suggestion I had, which I did a drawing on it as well and gave it to him. But I think that's about all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Todd.
Have any questions?
Just to be clear, if I'm looking on the plans here at the west elevation of the studios, and it looks that the wall is 21 feet high, I believe. Is that just, are we all in agreement on that? 21 feet?
His property?
Yes, sir.
Well, he first said it was going to be a 1-story, but the artist's conception is a 2-story. 21 feet, is that a 1 or 2-story?
I'm just trying to get clear what dimensions we're talking about. Sam, is that 21?
It's 15 feet, and there's a 7-foot grade change, excuse me, I'm sorry. 7-foot grade change on the property, front to back.
Does anyone else?
The drawing says 21 feet at the low point, taller from there. On sheet 831.
I'm sorry. I don't have those sheets with me. I apologize. I didn't. Whether they're.
And while Sam is looking at that, Michael, the other issue I wanted to ask is the distance between the property line and or the neighboring building. Does the code speak to that?
Yeah, there's no requirement because it's a commercial zone underlying that, so it's a zero setback. And in fact, he has notched the building. The front portion of the building is indeed further than the 5'2". It's actually been pushed out a little bit further, and only once it gets behind the house does it come to the 5'2" dimension on the property line.
Right, right.
This went to 15 feet, so it's 6 feet lower and went straight across. So, This is an earlier plan.
Okay.
It's 15 feet tall. It's, and there's a 7-foot grade change. We incorporated that into our current plan, a 7-foot grade change on the property from 28th Street down to the alley.
Is that 1 or 2 story?
It's 1.5. It's got a mezzanine inside of it, so.
Well, there's 4 tenants in our building that's next door. There's 4 tenants in our building. There's 4 tenants in our building next door, and it does seem like it would be extremely close, and a 2-story, and it's, but I think the main concern is, to me, is it's going to be aesthetically on the backside, detracting from for our area. Our 3 buildings have been there for a long time. Another owners of 2 other properties are here as well that wanted to wish to talk, but they're it's just, I'm concerned about it looking, disturbing my tenants, and it's just detracting from the value and the aesthetics look. If it, it's just because the backside is very plain.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Todd. Did anyone else have anything to add to Mr. Todd's comments? Yes, sir.
Well, not necessarily to his comments, but regarding the parking issue.
Could you please state your name and address?
Yeah, my name is Jeffrey Hill. I live on 600 Northwest 28th Street. I'm speaking also on behalf of Tammy Donnell. She's a property owner for that house, as well as several other properties right around in the area. Currently, several people use that street for parking. Some of the tenants in from his buildings and the houses across the street use that as well. The Paseo Grill, several of their employees use it for parking. So basically, it's kind of a congested area pretty much on a weekly basis, and especially during special events and so forth. The fire marshal has prohibited that area from parking because of the congestion during the Paseo Festival. However, other days where it's equally congested or close to it, a lot of times there's cars on both sides of the street, and you have a very narrow way. Only one car can pass at a time. The plan opens up 12 parking spaces plus 2 handicap spaces, with just the tenants alone, figuring 8 studio spaces on the one building. That's 8 potential parking spaces that would be needed. The multi-tenant areas, figure 4 or 5 tenants, not customers, would need parking, and then the restaurant would have employees as well. We calculated at least a net loss of 3 to 5 spaces in that area. Plus, one of the street parking spaces would be eliminated for the access point in between the 2 buildings.
Michael, thank you very much for the comments. Did you want to comment on the parking?
It's UD district east of Classen, and that area is exempt from the parking requirements. So they're providing parking they don't need to provide.
One of the issues regarding the parking specifically, one of the issues we face in many of the districts we oversee, there are no parking requirements, and in certain places parking is already an issue, and additional development still wants to take place, and given the way the laws are written and the code is written, the ordinances, they're allowed by right to develop even without providing a parking space.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a concern about hearing this project if, in fact, there's a new drawing out there that says it's 15 feet, because all the drawings here say that that building is 21 feet. And it steps, but when it steps, it doesn't change size, and 6 feet would change the design, I think, considerably. So I question whether or not this is a legitimate thing for us to hear today.
Okay, fair enough. Betsy, thank you. Are there, go ahead, Sam.
I didn't know if there were other speakers. Betsy, you're right. We need the correct drawings here. I agree with you. Because I think it would make a difference to the neighbor. those changes, can they be done administratively, or do they need to be part of this discussion today? Or do we want to talk about other items that are on our list, scope of work?
I would suggest that we, after we hear from the other neighbor, we just make sure and confirm there are no additional questions or issues.
Yes.
My personal feeling, and others may disagree, is that I think this is a fairly significant change, and it's going to change the look of that west building, so I would feel uncomfortable leaving it entirely up to staff. I would want a continuance and have it come back.
You're up.
Yes, sir.
Lee Foster, I own 617 Northwest 28th, which is it's the one apartment that's exactly like my father-in-law's. I previously owned this lot, sold it to the Orrs, and I was kind of bamboozled on I always thought that the fence that I sold was where the property line was. Well, it was my fault for not performing a PIN survey, but we found out later that that is not the case. The main thing on this long building that we're concerned about, the rest of it looks great, but why do we have this one long, the back of LD's apartment complex is going to look like a prison workout yard. It's just going to be a big flat wall. And that's the main issue I think we're fighting over, is that, and just the distance from his apartment and the structure you're proposing, or they're proposing. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you very much. Were there any other concerns about this project beyond the western wall? I think the project looks great, other than that one particular issue.
Is there any way they could beautify the west side of the building?
Well,
I'm sorry. Is there any way that they could just beautify this west side of the building that is so, that has this prison look? And they also own the property that's directly behind us, and so it's, we're kind of surrounded with 2 large walls. It's starting to look confining there. But if there was some way to give it a little bit of character or something, or a little more Santa Fe or look to it, maybe would help.
I would like to continue this item.
okay.
I'm sure you understand.
How long would you like to continue it?
Just till the next meeting.
All right.
Is that June? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, late June.
The June meeting? Michael, how are we on the deadlines and all?
Being that they're an application that's already in the door, we have until next Tuesday for them to turn around any new drawings for us.
Is that fast enough? Is that
Oh, yeah.
long enough for you?
Sure.
Okay.
I have one other concern before we let it go, just so you'll be aware. The ground that these sit on are about, it's about, 3 feet, in some places higher than the alley. I think you mentioned it was 8 feet from 8 feet of fall across the
From
property.
28th Street to the alley.
So I presume what you're going to do is you're going to have to slope all that down to the alley.
That's right.
There's already a water problem in that alley, and I'm in the building across the alley from it. And also, these cars, when they're pulling in, pulling out, there's a lot of cars that are, between, in a half a block, not even that, in a few lot spaces, there's a lot of cars that might be pulling out there, and we have, occasionally there's people even parked in the alley, so the alley's pretty heavily used. And I'd prefer the dumpster somewhere else, because all of that alley right there is higher than our floor level, and the trucks have just busted that alley to pieces. So, you know, those are problems. They're not necessarily your problems, but, and I'll try not to have them cloud my judgment. But I do think that if you could, I don't know if there's a way you could rearrange that. Maybe you could back the building up to these other guys and move this thing up a hill a little bit for the parking. That might, you could landscape that, and that might alleviate some of their problems. I don't know. Those are issues that you need to make sure you can really even do that. I don't know how a dumpster is going to get in there. A dumpster truck is going to get in there and maneuver. With there's power poles on the other side of the building that are in the alley right away, and just maybe include more of the detail of the other side of the alley in your site plan.
Okay.
Right now, it's a little. I think it's a little more complicated than that. That's it.
Okay.
One more little thing.
Yes, Betsy.
Just since you're going to be taking a look at it, the thing that struck me was kind of what one of the speakers mentioned, is that there's so much detail in the front building, and there appears to be very little. I mean, it's just kind of a strip for the second building. It is. And I thought that was a little odd, but I'm not sure how it's supposed to work. One thing I would like to see is some kind of, this is beyond what you have to show, but the parking and the roadway in between those buildings looks pretty tight. And I'd like to see you plop a compact car and a mid-sized car and a large car in those parking spaces, just for your own edification, because you get one of those big old trucks and nobody's going to be able to drive through that one-way driveway.
I agree with you.
Okay. That's all.
All right.
All right. The applicant has indicated he would be fine with a continuance to the next meeting. Do we have any motions?
I so move.
Okay, a second? It's Robeson and Sellers. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? June 24th. Yes. The June 24th meeting. Thank you very much. Item 6A, 500 Northwest 28th Street.
Yes, this item was heard at the meeting, the commission meeting of April 22nd. And essentially what they're proposing to do is add square footage to the front of the building, and that would displace the colonnade that was previously approved for this project last fall. Both staff and the commission expressed concern at that meeting about the loss of the colonnade and the fact that it would kind of flatten out the facade of that building and lessen the articulation and fenestration that faces that street, and cause some problems with respect to shade and shadow and make it less inviting for pedestrian access and entrance. So the matter was continued the last meeting for the applicant to try and address those concerns. And we have met with the applicant on a couple occasions based on the revised drawings that are in your packet. And we are recommending approval because they have done a few things with the detailing of the windows on the front facade, both first and second floor level, that we feel at least somewhat compensates for the loss of the colonnade. It doesn't completely replace the fact that the colonnade is gone, but it's a better solution than the version that you had before you at the meeting on April 22nd. So we're recommending to the commission that you approve the project. I'm prepared to respond to any questions the commission may have.
Any questions from the commission?
think the only question I have is probably minor, but related to the elevator, is there a penthouse that goes with the elevator?
I don't believe so. No, I believe it just stops up in the second floor. I don't know if there needs to be anything above that. I was not aware of anything that needed to be above the elevation of the second floor roof.
That would be something to find out, and if it has any impact, but at least in my experience, with or without bona fide penthouse, there are certain height requirements for an elevator to hold the hoist beam and that sort of thing, and it may or may not be taller than your roof line, so it's something to be aware of.
Okay. The roof line does extend a little bit higher in that area, but I'm not 100% sure.
It's probably not a big deal because even if it comes up, as long as it doesn't come up a lot, it would be shielded, but
If it ends up changing the elevation of the building on the north facade, then they'll have to come back for a revision, which would probably be done at staff level, unless it was something really radical.
I don't disagree with that. I just wanted to call attention to it.
Betsy?
When Brian pointed out the elevator, I've never seen an elevator that works quite like this, because it's got an opening into to the north, according to the plans, on the first floor, and to the east on the second floor. So I'm thinking you're probably going to have to rearrange your plan a little bit so that works a little bit better.
Okay.
And it'll probably, I would think, change the shape of that balcony a little bit.
It can still be moved into the building, I think, a little bit further if it needed to be, to stay away from especially any exterior modifications.
I have a quick question. This is actually clarifying, and I already know the answer, but I just want to call it out. On your A202, the second floor floor plan, you have that small window from, I think, your prior version to the north on the east side. And if the renderings all show the larger windows, but if we could just call that out and make sure it matches the renderings, that'd be great. Any other questions? Betsy, did you get the answer or an answer you were looking for?
Yeah, I just wanted to point it out to the applicant because it's going to have a change that will change their drawings a little bit.
I'll make a motion to approve on condition that the window be clarified to match, and this would all be approved by staff. The window be matching the elevation, and when the elevator is finalized, that be reviewed by staff too.
The motion by Fitzsimmons. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Sellers. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations. You're approved. Thanks, Chairman. Okay, item 6B, 915 Northwest 8th Street.
This item is another one that was heard previously by the commission. Initially, it was heard last fall, early winter, for the demolition of the existing single-family residence, and that was approved, and the building has been torn down. It came back to you on March 25th for the commission to consider the proposal for 3 new single-family residential structures on the site. There were a variety of issues raised. by both the commission and concerned residents in the neighborhood with respect to density, height, privacy, parking, and a variety of other associated issues. And the applicant was encouraged to meet with his neighbors to try and resolve some of those issues. And as you can see in the report, there was a meeting that did take place. But the upshot is that there have been relatively few changes with respect to those concerns. There are still 3 structures. They are still the same height. They still have the rooftop decks that may have caused some people in the neighborhood to have some concerns regarding their privacy. There were some changes made that were specific and did relate to some of the concerns that were expressed at the meeting, including the fact that all 3 buildings are now sprinklered, and therefore fire access down that driveway is no longer an issue. So they've been able to narrow up the concrete drive that reaches to the rear homes from Northwest 8th Street, and that takes a lot of impervious surface out of the mix, and it makes it look much more attractive, I think, than it did previously. But essentially, the mass and bulk and height and setbacks of the homes that you see in the packet you have before you today are essentially the same as the packet you saw last time. So you've got a couple of letters that were sent in to us prior to the last hearing. We've received a couple more in the past week or so. I think there's 3 perhaps, 2 that we received earlier today, and I think 1 that was received over the weekend or on Friday that we've transmitted to you by email. I think we have hard copies of those available for you at the dais. So that completes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions that the commission may have.
Does anyone have any questions for Michael right now? All right. Mr. Haas.
Yeah, we also, as far as the privacy issue goes, when we met with the collective homeowners in the area, the one homeowner that had the issue with the privacy kind of retracted that, saying that he'd misjudged the scale of the tree beside him on the lot, the empty lot next to him, not our lot, but the empty lot between them, and said privacy is not going to be issued because there's huge trees there that aren't either of ours to worry about. So as far as everything else goes, we added a lot more green space into the garage, broke up the concrete as per everybody's request to soften the look a little bit more, added a little bit additional landscaping. We had conversations with the fire department, the fire, so that we decided to shrink the width of the driveway a little bit and then just go with sprinkler systems to make people feel a little bit more at ease, and also the fire department so they can actually not have to worry about getting a truck back there. And then, you know, as noted in the packet, we had a meeting with everybody about as far as design and aesthetics goes and any changes they would like to see, privacy concerns such as that. The only real feedback that we got was that they would just prefer a single-family home. Other than that, they didn't have fundamental issues with it itself, just that they would like to see, you know, everything, the single-family home. So.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Haas at this point?
So I guess in kind of your summary of items that you mentioned that were changes, you mentioned architect and engineer. That I still have similar issues as before in that we don't know that this will actually be engineered other than a statement that somebody may provide a stamp. The metal siding I still have issues with. I don't know that it's an architectural metal siding, and I think what I'm most concerned about is the pattern and density and the precedent that it sets with the large multifamily, large driveway. It's not within the pattern of the neighborhood and even what's recommended within the city. And then I am also concerned about what is in effect, at least on one elevation, it appears as a four-story building with occupied roof deck. It's not covered, but I would think technically that would be considered a four-story building by code.
To address all those issues, the metal siding is largely used in the area. It's no different than anybody else is using. And also in the house across the street, that was approved. The same company, same, slightly different profile, but we like to, obviously use high-end materials the same way. Similar to the house across the street, architect's involvement will be as 100% necessary by the city in any way it needs to be, same with the engineer stamp and everything like that, just like when any other plans. The project could not even go forward without those things, right? Those aren't things I can bypass at all. They have to be there. I've talked with zoning, city, and everybody as far as this project goes, showed them the plans and everything. We're A-okay as far as everything goes. I'll have the trust engineer, architect, and everybody signing off on those, on their exact things, just as if I would have a plumber sign off on when he's installing his items. As far as the street's concerned, there's already multifamily. This isn't actually technically multifamily, but there is already on single lots or 1.5 lots up the street. There's I don't know the address, the red brick one. That's a multifamily home. There's more. There's already plenty of multifamily in the neighborhood, and that's not necessarily what we're even trying to achieve. We still would like to have they have their own green space, they have their own yards, they have all the accessibilities of a regular single-family home. So, I think that was it.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions, maybe we should let some of the audience members speak. Matt, did you have a comment?
Just a follow-up question. The other multifamily homes that you were referencing up the street, are those new homes or are those homes that have been there?
Well, depending on how you define multifamily, some would be new and some would be old and existing. So there's a couple that are newer projects that were built, and then there's some that are being revamped, like that red brick home's under construction right now. They're remodeling it and preparing it again for occupancy. So,
Well, to be clear, it's not the fact that it's multifamily that's concerning. It's the pattern of the wide driveway, the individual houses on one lot. If this were one building with 3 units in it, I would have a much easier time.
okay, and I understand that. Getting the feel from what I've talked with the neighbors of, they actually feel like the one building with multiple units would cheapen that much more than the 3 freestanding structures. And as far as, just experience, it tells me generally like a townhouse or a condo is going to sell less than a single-family residence, which, for the cheapening fact of it, right? The driveway itself isn't actually that wide compared to some of the other projects, like in scale compared to some of the other projects, right? We shrunk it intentionally, and we added all that grasscape to make it look kind of, unique in its own right. So, but there's, of course we're doing a lot of modern down here. So, there are lots of concrete walls and lots of concrete in this neighborhood already, but we're still trying to soften that up as per request, so.
Okay, thank you. Any audience members, please come up and sign in and state your name and address, please.
I'm Ann Dell. I live at 925 Northwest 8th, which is in the same block as 915. We did have a meeting at our house to discuss this, but we didn't really come to any conclusion. I think a bunch of neighbors actually expressed their apprehension about the design. And there are 3 things that really bother me the most. One is that there is no place to park on that property except in the garages or on the street. And anybody who has two cars will have to have them in the garage all the time, or else one of them will have to be on the street. And there is no parking on that side of the street right now. I don't know if that's going to change or not. I don't know when that no parking thing came about. It may have to do with the church that's down the street, and maybe the residents a while back decided they didn't want people parking up and down the street all the time. But at any rate, I think the parking is a major, major issue, and I can see that if I lived in one of those little houses, I would, you know, and we had 2 cars, I would want one of them in the street so that you could go in and out as you pleased without having to back out and let somebody else out. And certainly guests, there's no room for that. And also that driveway, I guess in a sense it looks a little better than just a solid slab of concrete, but I can't see that it's going to absorb any more water or do anything except get weedy, and people are going to wonder who's going to keep it mowed and who's going to keep it cleaned out. I also wonder if those slabs of concrete will move or be displaced over time, certainly move more easily than a solid piece of concrete would. I mean, it looks better on paper, but I don't know about in reality how it would look and function. There's one thing that is really, really important to me, and that is that after the past month, we have had, and actually last fall too, we had tons and tons of water that come down the street and on the properties from up the hill from us and from my neighbor Dr. Kyle Muse. And at any rate, from those lots up above us, there's a lot of water that comes down, and much of it we've managed to divert to the alleyway between us and the French tulip florist on 9th and Classen. But basically, the French tulip has gotten water in their building over the last month. We have 3 French drains on our property trying to keep the water out, and so far it kept it out of the house. But there's a lot of water. It's like a waterfall back there. And I don't know if complaining to the city about these properties, I was under the impression that you couldn't let your water just wash away somebody else's property, but that basically that's what's happening. And I think if you have all this construction up there with virtually no lawn, there's a tiny, tiny bit of lawn in the front, but there's nowhere for the water to go. I can't see where that water is going to go, except it's going to go in my house. That's another major concern of mine. And as far as the way it looks, I think that a little bit more green space would be great. I would not be opposed to 2 single-family homes, but 3 on a 50 by 140-foot lot is too many. And I don't think it's consistent with either the house that the Hawes brothers are building across the street or with our house or with Dr. Muse's house. I think that's all I have to say. But I think my husband has some remarks to make, too.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Brian Dell. I live at 925 Northwest 8th Street, which is the northeast corner of 8th and Classen. I would also advise the committee that Kyle Muse, who lives next door to us at 919 Northwest 8th Street, and who was here and spoke last time, couldn't be here today because he has to work. He's a chiropractor, and his practice prevented him from coming today. My wife mentioned several things that were of interest to us and of concern. The principal concern that we have is with regard to the idea that, as noted in the staff report, that only one structure is supposed to be on one lot, and the proposal is to divide this lot up into three lots and make 3 buildings in there. We could probably get by with an actual duplex that was on that property, for example, but the idea of putting 3 different things on there is going to create a lot of problems with regard to water and the privacy as well as the parking. I'm rather mystified by the idea that anybody would want to park in line in a garage anyway. Every time that I've seen this going on anyplace else throughout the rest of this city, it's as she described it. Somebody's going to end up having to leave for work or something, and they want their car out. That means that one car basically is going to be out all the time. The Hawes brothers tried to suggest, let's say, that rather than have 3 3-bedroom houses there, that it would be just as dense if there were 2 3-bedroom houses there. Well, I think that would eliminate at least 2 cars, probably. Now, they talked about duplexes that are already in the area. There is a duplex that was built probably in the 20s that is next door to the one that they talk about at 916 Northwest 8th Street. There is a duplex that was built in the 800 block last year. There's an apartment house that's been there for, I don't know, not quite 100 years probably, that's at the corner of Chartel and 8th Street. This is not a dense area. These houses all down there are all one family, basically. Now, I think part of the problem is that the Haas brothers paid a premium for this lot that they got. And it's their desire, of course, and I don't blame them for wanting to, is to make a profit on the fact that they've got a premium and they need to sell 3 different lots. Some of the things that were included as their recommendations in the staff report are, again, a puzzle to me, just like the inline parking. The idea, for example, that having a sprinkler system would negate the need to have the fire department comes out is a bit of a surprise to me. I don't care if I've got a sprinkler system. I really would like to have the fire department come out if I had a fire. And I don't understand how that would make it possible to have this divided little sidewalk up there, or that it would be an issue. The other thing, too, is another, and this is totally aside, and it talks about the building materials that they wanted to use knotty pine and said that it would have a 15-year life and that it would, and they cited my house as having knotty pine on it. Well, I called my builder and I looked at the invoice too, and I can assure you that the cedar on my house would be surprised to be called knotty pine. But I don't know that that's a particular issue with regard to this, but it is a little bit of a difference with regard to the things that are going on here. But our principal concern is that we're talking about 140-foot by 50-foot lots throughout this area. And that the idea apparently is to divide this one lot up into 2,333-foot lots and put buildings on there. In essence, that by putting the described square footage that they want in there, they basically want to take up 3/4 of this lot with buildings. 3 houses there are going to create not only parking problems, but I can see 6 to more trash bins in front of the house every Thursday. These will be problems that affect the property values that we have, and we would like that as to be as part of the consideration. What we would like actually is to be only one structure on that property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, while Lee's coming up, I'm just going to address the parking issue. As you may have heard my comment on the Paseo property, there are certain areas that we oversee, Paseo, Northwest 23rd, the Cottage District, that don't have parking requirements. So while the parking may or may not be an issue in the eyes of the Oklahoma City ordinances, zoning ordinances for this area, there is no parking that's officially required. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just address those ones before I forget it. We move on to other ones. As far as the fire goes, it's not that a fire truck can't get back there. It's the mitigated time between how long it would take them to run the hose out there. That's how I was described to me. So it's not like they wouldn't come to your house if your house is burning. It just gives them a lot more time. It also, is effective in stopping most, right? It would save the issue. To our neighboring, the two new construction houses to the west of this, actually, we have more or very similar of green grass than are all our neighbors. Each house has its yard and has lots of green space. We didn't eliminate any more. There's plenty more that have less green space. Not that we want that anyway. We strove to make sure that everybody had their own yard in this. As far as parking goes, we actually have from the garage door from the front house to the back house is actually almost 30 feet. So even if somebody wanted to have, let's say one car out there, I mean, we strive to add in lots of that space in there, even though, like you said, it's not a requirement. We wanted to make sure that the people who purchased the homes would actually have lots of space and convenience. This is by no means would we get by doing things that were inconvenient to anybody. as far as, the homeowners and the purchasers go. So, these are things that we really did take into consideration so that, the future homeowners and the neighbors wouldn't have hassles. As far as the house across the street, yes, we're doing that one as well. That's a single-family home, and keeping that in mind, we only look at this project to improve the neighborhood that we're doing work in, not to detract or to take away from anything that this neighborhood's going. The water issue, well, we all know empty land is the worst when it comes to flowing water. Us putting 3 structures up with a fence is going to help mitigate a lot of that water that's rushing down the street through 2 empty lots into these people's backyards. So that's actually going to help a lot. And obviously, we will address any drainage concerns on the property as we're building them and adding irrigation, French drain systems, and everything that would need to be there to, to make sure the water goes where it's supposed to go. So.
Right, thank you. Michael, maybe you could help clarify what's under the purview of this particular body in terms of shared maintenance agreements or drainage or not under the purview?
The commission is charged with the interpretation, application, and implementation of the guidelines and the regulations that pertain to the various districts that come under your jurisdiction, and this being one of them, the Cottage District. This one's being a little bit different in that it's part of the DTD1 district that would normally go to DDRC, but that was split off a number of years back, so you do have the purview over this area. And really, it's all about the exterior design of the structure. My expectation is and I can't speak to how Mr. Hawes plans to resolve this, but when you've got 3 houses in this kind of configuration, you're probably going to have some sort of shared maintenance agreement that's going to take care of those issues. I honestly, with regard to the trash bins, in all likelihood, there are going to be 6 bins probably here, or at least 3 individual ones that'll be drawn out by the individual homeowners. I would expect that people living in these homes would want to have some sort of a landscape maintenance company take care of this in a combined fashion, so it's all consistently maintained. So.
I just wanted to, because there's a lot of comments being made and probably more will be made, but I want to focus and structure a little bit. Of the comments I've heard, the things that really come under our purview, in my opinion, center on, is this type of development, does it fit the pattern of the neighborhood or does it not? I mean, that's directly from the code.
Yeah, there's the character issues. There's parallels here between this and the Lynn residence that you heard last month. So there's character issues that can be taken into consideration. There's compatibility and consistency, continuity for the neighborhood, and whether or not the commission believes the design of the structures is compatible, whether or not the commission believes that the bulk and massing of the homes is compatible with other structures in the neighborhood. And again, the neighborhood is not located, it's pretty broad and incorporates a variety of structures. And predominantly you have single-family homes. Many and most of them may be single-story homes. But what we're seeing in the neighborhood lately is a lot of more contemporary homes, such as the design you see here before you, and many of those are 2-story and some 3s. So this particular project does not appear to be out of character from a standpoint of design or bulk. I think the biggest issue you're seeing here, and you're hearing it a lot in the letters that we received and in the people that are commenting here, is that you have 3 homes on what would normally be accommodating just 1 home on the 1 lot.
Okay.
I think that would be a consideration for us in terms of how it relates to the rest of the neighborhood. So I think that's in our purview. I'm concerned about access on that lot in the future and how it's all taken care of. But I'm really concerned about the density on that lot.
There have been lots in the Cottage this size that have been developed as duplexes, 2 units in 1 structure. So you have the issue of perhaps not having these as single-family detached product, but perhaps combining 3 units into one building, and perhaps some of the issues would go away, depending on how it was configured. The other issue that impacts this lot more significantly than some of the other lots you've seen that have been built as duplexes recently is that the alley in the back of the lot is not there. It's been vacated. So that takes away an access point that would have probably served those 2 rear residences very well. But absent that alley, it has forced some design considerations that you're seeing evidenced in the plan that you have before you. So.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I have one question that relates to the lot split, and it's related to the code section about how that lot split would happen. Is this a planned unit development? Is it a simple gerrymandering of
minor
lots?
subdivision. We've talked with the folks in the zoning department. Mr. Hawes has been in contact with those people as well. We followed up, after he talked to them, we followed up with those same people to make sure that we were getting the same story, and everything we've heard from the people in the department that handle the lot splits is that he has 3 viable ways to create lots for each one of these houses, or perhaps to do a condo, but that would put all 3 on one lot still, which would be a different type of variance, but still a variance.
So does the driveway become a private street then?
I'd have to talk to the other folks. Perhaps Mr. Hawes knows, but
It becomes, it's just still a private drive, but it becomes a common area in the covenants. So speaking to the landscaping and that kind of thing, we plan to actually have a fully set up covenants that will take care of all those issues as far as maintenance of the driveway, landscaping, egress, and all that. Just like anyone would have to if you put up any sort of condo structure or anything like that. You have to have that. Even if you had a duplex that had shared a common wall, you want to make sure that those things are put in order. That way you never have a discrepancy between homeowners. So that's all. I went over all that with zoning and my civil engineer to lay out everything how it's supposed to be for the city. So.
Okay, thank you. Could we, if there are no objections, I'd like to hear from some more of the audience members if we could. Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee Peoples, 824 Northwest 7th Street. I want to begin by saying I share the concerns expressed by the Dells and the others who wrote in their concerns. This attempt to squeeze 3 structures onto this single-family lot is putting this project out of context and out of scale with the neighborhood. As you know, the guidelines require projects to be designed in context with the rest of the area. They also require new development to incorporate the approximate scale and proportions of the traditional block pattern. As Mr. Philbrick stated, the vast majority of historical and new homes in the Cottage District are single-family homes on this lot size. What we're seeing, I think, is an unfortunate example of changes coming to the neighborhood. Developers motivated only by profit, trying to get as much as they can out of every little inch of land that they own. Those of us who chose to build here did so because we liked the mix of traditional and contemporary single-family homes. That really makes up, to me, the character of the Cottage District. And as you know, the Planning Department's vision for this neighborhood, as expressed in the Downtown Design Framework, is for low-density residential development in the Cottage District. So for those reasons, I would urge you not to approve this application to build 3 homes on the single-family lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kevin Thurman. I own the lot at 922 Northwest 8th, and I agree with everything that has been said before us. My main concern, again, is the trees. By the city's landscaping code that you encourage to keep the urban forest. You want it to reduce the soil erosion. You want to preserve the existing trees, and there's going to be another, I think it's 8 trees on this lot that are probably going to be clear-cut again out of the neighborhood. I know one of them's already fallen over because of the flooding and the water. But that's really all I want to say is about the concern about the landscaping.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thurman. Any other members of the audience who would like to add something?
I have I have a bunch of comments that, if nobody else is,
That seems to be it.
okay. Really, none of them really are pro or con. They're just like, it's really too bad that alley isn't accessible. Totally gone.
Yeah, it's vacated.
Can't be.
Yep. You'd have to get everybody that owns property on the block to agree to have it reinstated, and I'm not sure what the likelihood of that happening is.
Sorry, and Michael, that would be reinstated at the homeowners or the property owner's cost on that block? What would the process be?
I don't know the process.
There's actually structures that are actually on that alley now. So, I mean, I don't think it would be like anything feasible. I mean, you'd be doing a lot of, there's certain people that you could do it with, but then there's, like, I've walked that whole fence line. It's gone, it's pretty much done. So that was our first hope, to use that alleyway. We love the look of, having no driveway in the front, of course, right? We don't have those accesses, unfortunately. And to, just to speak on the density on the three houses, the density is usually rated on occupancy, not necessarily the structures themselves. And there are multiple, like, the condominiums that are sitting on the corner of Classen and 7th that are far more dense than what we're proposing to do. Has nothing to do with cramming as much onto one lot, as much as it is an inspired concept of, offering not low price per square foot, but a smaller home for people to live downtown in, instead of a 3,000 square foot house that, hypothetically is $1 million or something. It's a much more affordable option. We have, plenty of people that have come to us and asked us for, hey, I'm really looking to live down there, but, do you have anything that's going to be smaller, right? I mean, I don't want a 3,000 square foot, it's a 2,500 square foot house. If you look at a topical view of our homes and actually what our footprint is taking up as far as actual structure goes, and look at many of the other projects and existing homes that have been there for 100 years, we're not taking up any more, and sometimes even in some cases less square footage than other homes are. So density, I do have a hard time wrapping my head around some of the density questions just because of what this area has. I mean, like Michael said, this is a broad neighborhood. This is not located, this neighborhood's just not one street, right? It's a broad neighborhood. And even on this street, there's tons of, like, cool and different things going on, not just single-family homes. And actually, most of the homes that are being built that are new construction are 2 or more stories. I think there's one that's 1 story. So, I mean, there's a house next to another house up the street, I believe. That would be, I don't know the address, but anyways, it's 3 stories. It sits right next to a single-family home, 1-story house, right? The scale, that hasn't been an issue in the past, obviously, right? So I just want to make sure that we're considering those things, not just this one individual house.
Right. And those are good points. Let me just see if Betsy, can I just jump in here? And I just want to. The height is not an issue per the code. The density, meaning dwelling units per acre, is not an issue per the code. What many codes have is something called floor area ratio. We don't have it. What we have instead is this character and context clause. But the floor area ratio looks at the total square footage and puts the total square footage of the built development over the square footage of the lot. And many times codes try to quantify how much can be built on a given lot that way. We don't have that, and so I think the crux of the question is coming down to this: does it fit the character, does it fit the context? At least that's the way this is all occurring to me right now. So.
Brian, did you want to say something?
Just one quick thing, since the issue with regard to the vacation of the alley came up, I went to the county today to find out what, if anything, was with regard to that alley. Turns out that on March 24th of 1930 that the city vacated the alley by ordinance. But what that meant, and as they specifically stated in the ordinance that they passed, was that all of the easements for all of the utilities, high lines, sewer, water, and everything else that went down the alley remained as easements. The only thing was is that the city noted in the ordinance that if at any time in the future they want to start using that alley again, they can do so at no cost to the city. So that basically clarifies the issue with regard to the vacation of the alley.
Okay, thank you.
Very interesting. Okay, so one thing that you mentioned, Mr. Hawes, was about the metal panel. Even though materials are not required as part of your packet, as the committee, we can request to see those materials. And I think what we're doing is we're requesting to see the manufacturer and the color of any material you're using on the exterior of the houses.
And I brought that in, I brought one piece in last time for the 9/16 meeting. And it was approved. So that's why we definitely tried to stick with similar products so we wouldn't have any of those issues at all. Right?
So if you could bring that back in for this meeting, because I don't think I was here for that meeting. Not your fault. Also, it appears that historically, this is interesting because there's an article in Urban Land earlier this year that talks about accessory dwelling units. And it's to encourage a variety of people living, I mean, very much like Mr. Hawes was saying, smaller units for people that would want to live more affordably than, say, somebody in the big house. Like in my house, in my garage apartment. Interesting reading. It doesn't apply directly to this, but it's interesting reading.
By the way, in that article, the accessory dwelling units are typically by code defined to be under a certain size, so maybe they're 800
They're
square feet.
smaller.
Right.
But I don't know that this 1,400 square foot thing would be too big.
It would be too big.
And then, our code doesn't actually have that in there. So even though in this neighborhood, historically in this neighborhood, and this is, Brian and Ann lived in Mesta Park prior to this. I lived in a house in Mesta Park that was divided into 6 units. And it was something that happened after the war when people were coming in town, and maybe they worked at Tinker or whatever. But this neighborhood has had, and some of the illustrations in the packet showed me that this neighborhood has had actual 2 separate dwellings on many of the lots, including the lot on the corner of 8th and Francis, which I think they've maintained that back unit. Do you guys know? Anybody?
Yeah, I think they have.
But I would also agree that 3 units on a single lot is probably more than the expectations for this neighborhood. So I think that's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
So I'm going to follow up on Betsy's comment in regards to the metal panel.
Sure.
It seems to me that it's not strictly a color or finish. And I'm going off memory, and maybe some of the other commissioners can chime in, but it seems that that specific panel, the profile for that panel, is not in character with what I envision throughout the neighborhood. There is metal panel, but that specific profile I'm used to seeing in more rural settings or in warehouses. So I have some concerns with that, and even when I look at the rendering reflects a little bit different profile, a little bit cleaner profile than what I'm looking at here. So I kind of want to expand, I think you ought to look at that panel because to me it seems a little bit out of character.
The profile is slightly different than the one we're using across the street, of course. I just want to refresh my mind. I was just looking at panels the other day, so. Now that, I mean, you know, they have probably 100 different profiles, right? I mean, if that comes down to the concern, the final concern, we don't have an issue at all choosing something more appeasing to you guys.
So, I don't want to be prescriptive, but in the rendering it looks like it's a plank, where what I'm looking at in your profile does not look like a plank. It looks like what you see in a shed.
I don't disagree with that. The rendering shows it probably in a much nicer light, and we can get something that's basically identical to that rendering. So that's not an issue at all. So.
And then one last thing is the rooftop terrace.
Mm-hmm.
That seems out of character to me. Again, maybe I've just...
There's a lot of rooftop decks in this neighborhood now.
4-story.
3-story.
I think in actuality, there are 3 rooftop decks, but they sit on top of 2-story houses.
Yes, that would be the 3rd story, correct.
I just have a couple comments. Just to the discussion of density and context and character. To me, this is one of the most diverse neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods with a mix of single-story, single-family, 100-year-old homes, and 2- and 3-story modern homes, and then Class and Glen condos, which is a very dense property. So to me, it's very difficult to define what context and character is in this neighborhood because there's so much diversity. So I wouldn't think that this proposal's, I would say it's within the range of density and things like that, just in my opinion. To some of the comments about parking, I would agree that if you had a bunch of people parking out on the street, that could be concerning. You may be able to clarify this. It looks like your garages on your first levels are 20-foot wide spaces, and maybe not, but it looks like 2 cars could park in there side by side with even the single access garage door if you had 2 smaller vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Just one thing that I noticed, you know, if I had 2 small cars, I could probably park them side by side in there, which could alleviate some of the parking concerns.
Yeah, we joked if you had a smart car, you could probably just do circles.
Right.
On that.
But I would agree with the comments on the metal panel. I think the metal panel that is shown in the packet is something you buy at the hardware store that typically goes on sheds, and that would be my biggest issue with.
Sure, and that we would have no problem adjusting that at all. And back, actually, what you said about the fit-in character of the neighborhood, I think that was right on point, because that's one of the things we really did strive. Again, we drove that neighborhood. We know we're pretty intimate in all the streets in that neighborhood and all the different things going on. And I mean, there's, a plethora of different structures in that neighborhood, both residential and, commercial or condominiums and everything else, 100-year-old homes, 100-year-old, fourplexes. We feel like this goes into definitely the feel and the transition that the neighborhood's going into, which is the modern architecture, and a new feel on, yes, not exactly on that low square footage, but with that in mind, right? I know that I think there were like 1,000 square feet and under is what they were recommending in that article. I think it was pretty low. But we're not that far above it, and that similar concept of what we were trying to achieve, right? Same thing, affordable, but still urban and still in, the hip neighborhood that everybody wants to live in, right? Which is downtown, a block away from Midtown and everything else. So,
well, your comments are well received. In terms of the housing, what I'm trying to get my head around is 3 houses of 1,500 square feet roughly and 1,700. In your packet, one of the houses you used to show what a big house looks like next to a small house was 824 Northwest 8th, which is Steve Mason's. That's about 1,500 square feet, isn't it?
No. That's like, what Steve Mason says is like, I think that's close to 3,000 square feet.
Is it
That's a
3,000?
large home.
Okay.
Is it? Is it small?
If
Okay.
you look on the county assessors, I think it says it's 1,500 square feet.
Because it takes up the whole lot. I mean, you got the house and then the pool, and that's the entire lot.
Yeah.
Is that house?
I'm using the 1,500, and I got that from the assessor side.
Sure.
So let's put a pin in that. That may be
Yeah,
wrong.
I wonder if that would be the final square footage or not.
But what I when I saw that, I thought you're taking basically 3 Steve Mason homes and putting them on one parcel that's his size, and that just struck me as, just a little bit too much.
And I understand the concept of that. And when we were doing it, we're thinking of the same things, right? Like, how is this going to look on the lot? But in reality, of course, we're taking up less of the lot than his house is, right? Like, and in massing as well, right? Because, you have the pool wall next to his house that's coming up X amount of feet. I mean, the whole lot's gone, right? I mean, which is fine. I think it looks amazing. I think it's a great project, right? And we took that all into consideration. And it's hard to reference it around here because we're really trying to bring new and creative ideas to Oklahoma City from different areas, not necessarily that have been done every single time around here, but in places like, downtown Toronto or San Francisco and these other places where they've achieved this. I mean, it's been achieved beautifully.
And in Los Angeles, too, they've done great splitting lots and doing creative infill.
And we're not trying to put up 100 of these. That's not what we're trying to do. But I think this is a really good idea, and I think it would work. And also suffice a demand that's not being met at all downtown, which is a single-family residence that's affordable, like more affordable. I'm not saying that everybody can buy it, but maybe not necessarily the doctor from St. Anthony's, but 150 people under him could. You know what I mean? Like, just, bridging that gap a little bit, And I think the resistance we're getting for it just comes down to, the vision that others had when they built their property, right? Which we did when we were building 916, and then just other things that are going on in the neighborhood, and aligning those visions up.
I wonder, Mr. Hawes, a lot of people have spoken, and there's kind of the issue of, is it too much or is it not too much? And then there's the issue of this architectural metal. That architectural metal maybe could be addressed by staff if it were appropriate, or we could bring it back for continuance. However, I don't know how we're going to sidestep the issue of, is it too much or not? And if anyone has any insights, that'd be great. There seems like to be a mix of opinion here, or maybe someone should make a motion and we should see what happens. Donna.
I just want to comment and follow up on Betsy. I agree. I think it's too much, and you might say, well, okay, for this lot, it can work. But I think it would set a precedent, and that then you would see more trying to come in, and that really would change the character of what's been established. So I think it just would change the trend. I'm not against it, but if the residents are, and there's a feeling that it's too much, then this would be the time to say it's too much, rather than, you couldn't say it's too much next time.
Right.
Then that's it, you've changed the character.
And I understand that. And, I don't think we're the ones that set the precedent for this neighborhood at all as far as the 3 houses on lot. I mean, the 3 houses, yes, but not the density, right? And, I mean, I think that has to be a consideration as far as, like, we have Lisbon Lofts, the condominiums, and a 4-plex and multiple duplexes, right?
Yeah, and 2 of those you mentioned are not in the cottage district. So.
That's true. They're just part of the DTD one.
Okay, so where are we? Where are we with this one?
Well, I would make a motion that we, just to get it out on the table, that we deny because of the amount of density and the precedent that it might set, and how it might change the character of the area. And I don't like doing it, but that's kind of where I'm at.
If you make the motion, John, I'm going to ask you to include the reference to the code 7200.1.G4 development pattern, because that's what we've been talking about.
Okay, yeah, that would, do I have to remember that? What he said. I'll amend it to add the paragraph.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's a motion by Robeson, a second by Fitzsimmons. All in favor to deny, say aye. Aye. All opposed denial?
Nay.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm a nay.
I want to take a let's take an individual vote. Okay, let's do that again and raise your hands, please. Or do I raise their hands, or do I just call their name?
You can call their name if you want.
That'd be better. Okay. This is the recommendation to deny. George McQuistion, I vote aye. Brian Fitzsimmons. Betsy Brunstetter. Donna Cervantes. Jorge Charnico.
Nay.
Matt Guillory. John Robeson.
Aye.
Ben Sellers.
Nay.
Okay, that is 5 ayes to 3 nays. The ayes have it. The application is denied.
I just want to write that, based on what you guys denied it on, I'd like to just write down that code.
Sure, of course.
In my next, process.
It's 7200.1.G, and then parentheses 4, and it's entitled Development Pattern.
Okay.
Well, thank you very
Actually,
much.
it's funny, I read that, and I thought, based on the architecture in the neighborhood, that we were well within that zoning, so.
I think for me, it was the fact that there were 3 homes on the one parcel.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that's me too.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next case is 615 Northwest 7th Street.
This is a proposal to demolish an existing single-family residence at 615 Northwest 7th Street. For perspective, this is immediately west of the house that was recently approved for Mr. Bleakley, and which is right next door to the house that was recently denied by the commission for Mr. Lynn. North side of 7th Street, just 2 lots west of Dewey. The applicant does not have any, well, he has plans to eventually develop a new home on the site, but at this point does not have any plans to let you know what the design of that home would look like and the placement, massing, and bulk and character of that home would be. So we've analyzed the proposal for the demolition in light of the applicable regulations and guidelines, and as is typical for proposals for demolition in the cottage district, we've given the prerogative of the commission to make a determination as to whether or not this house is significant to the history of the district or the city, and then from there to make their recommendation on the project based on that determination. That completes our presentation. Prepared to respond to any questions the commission may have.
Any questions for Michael? Mr. Lee?
Yes, sir.
Did you want to talk a little bit about the condition of the structure?
There are currently 3 city council cases going through right now. There's one for unsecured openings, one for property maintenance, and one for dilapidated shed. And I was informed by Inspector Bumpus that this will all lead to eventually being dilapidated, and we were just trying to get it done before they do. He actually called me while we were here and said they already have quotes for the shed, and if this doesn't get approved, they're going to take down the shed.
Okay, thank you for that information. Questions?
Just a simple question. How long ago was the fire?
I'm not sure. But the whole interior is pretty much burned out.
Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you here to speak on this topic? I'm sorry.
Yeah, my only concern is I think the siding on that house is asbestos. So that was really my only concern, if it's going to get demolished.
Lee Peoples, 824 Northwest 7th again. I was just curious, I read the staff report noting that it was on in the survey, downtown survey, it came up as a historically significant house. And I know in the past, houses in much worse condition, people have shown up with engineers or other professionals to say, it's too inefficient to save this, it's too expensive. I didn't know if that was required, or if that's something people just do voluntarily. What sort of standard of proof do you hold people to when they're taking down these houses? Because I've seen people come with experts and put them up here for testimony, and I noted that there wasn't any of that in the application, so really just kind of curious about that.
Right. People do bring in experts occasionally, but we haven't wanted to force people to go out and hire an outside third party. So if they document, it's hard to come in without any pictures or anything. But if you document it, take pictures, tell us what's going on, and present a compelling case, then those cases have been approved in the past.
Okay, just a curiosity. Thank you.
Thank you. What are the implications of asbestos for as it relates to our decision?
There are just building code requirements that pertain to how that's removed and disposed of.
Okay. So in terms of our decision, it will not have a...
This material has been present in many homes that have been demolished in the Cottage District, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Anything else?
I think we know how it's going to go, but I would like to at least state that this, because it's a unique case in the sense that it's damaged by fire and quickly reaching dilapidation because of that, we should not let this establish a precedence, which we have been consistent in the past, of approving demolition without a known plan. This is a unique situation. I just wanted to say that. So.
I think that's a good point. I wonder if that could be reflected in the motion that's made.
Could be.
We'll have to wait and find out. All right, anyone else?
I would just like to say one more thing. Mary Davis and her husband Thomas lived in that house for, 80 years or something. And the house was fine and the house was in great condition until recently when she moved out. And then it just went downhill. So, if that's another consideration.
It's a good point, and it raises the whole topic of demolition by neglect. And it's something that we wrestle with and the city wrestles with, but it's hard to craft a code, a zoning ordinance that can anticipate that and can be prescriptive and enforceable. But demolition by neglect is a very important topic. So if that's the case here, I'm not sure that it is, but in general, it's critical. Brian.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for demolition of the structure because of the unique circumstances of damage by fire and dilapidation, whereas we would normally not recommend approval without a plan.
Okay, that's a motion by Fitzsimmons. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Sellers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you very much.
One bites the dust.
All right, no other business, so 8A, Communications Administrative Approval Report. Michael, any of these that you care to call out?
There was one minor change to Mr. Mason's residence in changing the material of the front wall from black onyx brick to stucco over masonry. And secondly, there was a minor change on the east facade of the Rise building at Walker and 23rd to insert a new door and a stoop and with handrails.
Okay, thank you. Planning Commission?
Yes.
Presenting demo ordinance again tomorrow.
Right.
Hopefully, it will be introduced.
Okay. Any other comments from Planning Department staff?
You guys did an awesome job at this meeting.
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Comments from commission members? Donna, do you want to say hi? Excellent. Okay, moving right along. No, say a little bit about yourself if you don't mind.
All right, Donna was appointed several months ago, but had a running conflict until this month.
There was one thing that I heard came up at the April 22nd meeting, which I was not here, but I did listen to the entire tape. And under commission comments, Mr. Cushton raised some concerns about the overlap between HL and UD in the Paseo district, because there's some text if you go.
Oh, yes, right,
yes.
right.
We've researched that to a certain degree, and we're pretty sure that a lot of what you saw there about the certificate of appropriateness and the historic preservation review is leftover text that was not expunged.
Okay.
In the cleanup that was meant to separate that out from HP. So.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Michael. Anything else? Yes.
Bravo for filling this thing, this committee. It is so nice to have.
Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah. This is great.
Thank you to the mayor's office. Absolutely. So nobody quit.
All right, the next meeting date is listed in your agenda. If there are no objections, we will consider ourselves adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.